Okay, I'm here with Alex, Hanno, and Luca Malacrino from Bravado. How are you?
Doing well. How are you doing?
I'm good. So I saw Bravado, of course. I loved it.
Thank you.
Yeah. So you directed the film.
I did.
What inspired you? I know that you wrote it.
No, no, we wrote it together. He wrote
Oh.
the script, we developed the story together.
Mm.
That's sort of our creative process. We
Okay.
tend to develop together, come up with ideas, and then I tend to write. But in terms of this one specifically, Luca and I were coming off the back of a couple of different films that we had developed and written, and we really we sat down and we said, okay, we want to write a story that we feel uniquely equipped to tell, something that comes from lived experience that we have agency to sort of speak on. Um, and for me specifically, I'm a screenwriter. That's first and foremost what I do. And so it kind of felt like that was the germ of the idea. Like, there's not a lot of movies about screenwriters out there. There's a lot of movies about actors, directors even, but screenwriters specifically. And so we kind of had that spark of like, okay, what would it look like if we had a movie about screenwriting and the screenwriting process? And then just developed from there. And we, sat down like we do and sort of locked ourselves in a room and started bashing out these ideas and taking it into different directions. And I'll let you speak a little bit about the film within the film process conceit and where that kind of came from.
So for us as well, it's always trying to use the lens of, creative storytelling and then business. So one thing that Alex and I did with this film is said, well, first of all, let's understand what the parameters are for making this movie. What locations do we have? Which actors do we want to work with? Let's write a script that we can actually shoot instead of writing a script that turns into a $10 million script that we can't shoot right away. And we sat down and had a day that we said, right, we are going to leave today with some kind of conceit. Alex put together 3 films. I put together 3 films that were independent, low-budget movies that had success. And we sat down and watched all of them. And we said, right, why were these successful? What did these guys do well? What didn't they do well? And then this idea of write what you know, authenticity with the screenwriter was first of all an area that we loved. And then we loved this idea of a film within the film. And then, okay, screenwriting, film within the film. And then ultimately we just kept going down this path, and I knew that I wanted to play ideally multiple characters because the first project we ever worked together was called The Chameleon, and I got to embody 2 or 3, 4 different roles, and I wanted to play the antagonist. It was like I said to Alex, like, hey, on this one, like, I want to play the bad guy. I don't want to play the rom-com kind of British charming kind of. I want to play something a bit darker, and I was so excited about working with Caitlin on this role. It just started moving forward, and honestly, I think we mapped out the ultimate story within that same day. Like, we left that day.
Yeah, I mean, once we kind of knew that this was going to be about a screenwriter who's trying to kind of perfect a script, we were like, okay, we're going to cut into the movie that she's writing. We're going to see multiple iterations of that movie. And it was like, okay, what is that movie about? And going to what Luca was speaking to about locations and availability and whatnot, he's always wanted to shoot in his home country of Wales, in Cardiff specifically. That's where he is from. And his family has a history there of running multiple different Italian restaurants. His father, Giovanni, very famous entrepreneur, businessman in that world. And Luca was like, I've always wanted to shoot in these restaurants. I've always wanted to do something with that. And one genre that we both love, I mean, I kind of learned film by shotgunning Scorsese movies, is the mafia genre. And so it sort of felt like a beautiful marriage of like, okay, we could go and shoot in Wales, have the movie that Amy Erickson, our protagonist, is writing, be a mafia movie, and kind of meld all of this and give Luke an opportunity to play multiple different characters, antagonists, and that's sort of where the germ of it all came from.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love how your role evolves into these different roles. I think it's pretty amazing and not an easy thing to do, and you nailed it.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah. In terms of, for me, when it comes to like different characters, it's always trying to find the truth within the leading, and then understanding not just a character, but like, who is this person? And when I worked with my acting coach for these roles, it was trying to really understand, right, what part of Luca is the third mafia? No spoilers. But what part of Luca is the third mafia character? What part of Luca is Patrick? And I think as long as you attack these from a place within, it starts to just present itself. It just kind of comes together in a nice way. But I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
I also love in the film how towards or at the end of the film they go to the studio and they basically want the script she originally had, and with the black lead, and it's angering to her. You see her like break out of that shell. um, I come from film development way back. It's my villain origin story.
We
But
all have them.
I've seen that happen countless times where it's like, well, why don't we make them screw whatever Nevada, let's make it in New York and let's make them a lesbian couple and they're black. And I've seen that happen time and time and time again, and I just found it very funny to watch in your film.
I appreciate that. Yeah, it's listen, it's an interesting subject matter when we're talking about, I mentioned the word agency and sort of like what stories do we have the not ability but the right to sort of tell. And I think more than anything what we really are trying to say at the end of the movie, no spoilers, is like Hollywood continues, let me rephrase this, the industry, the studio system, whatever you want to call it, I think continues to take the wrong lessons from successes in a sense. And they continue to think that like, oh well, this movie did well and it's this type of movie, so let's just make your movie that type of movie and it'll do well also. And that's just not the case. The reality is that movies do well when you have unique and I think powerful voices who really understand what they're trying to say and are allowed to say it the way that they want to say it, or tell the story the way they want to tell it. And I think really that's sort of in a way what the movie's culmination is about, is like, you know, a character finding their voice and standing by that and not folding to the industry, because oftentimes when that happens, that's when you see these movies completely flop. And of course, on the flip side of this, maybe that means that, you never have the ability to make that movie. That's a reality of this industry, sadly. We as indie filmmakers, we've kind of said, screw that. We're going to go and do the thing anyway. We're going to find a way to make it. But as Luca was saying, if this movie was, a $10 million, $20 million budget, we physically wouldn't be able to do that. And so I think it's it's an interesting, like I said, it's an interesting subject matter, or like topic, and we're just trying to sort of say our piece with it, I guess, our little piece.
So, as I mentioned in my review, Bravado really is the black swan of script writing. Absolutely. It is anxiety driven. As a writer myself, like I feel that pressure that she's feeling, and that trying to understand the characters that kind of get lost by the direction and the notes of others.
Yeah, I mean, I run a screenwriting group in LA. I've been a part of it for almost 10 years. I've ran it for like 5 years. And, I've seen every type of writer. I've seen the writers who are so stubborn that they'll never take a note. I've seen the writers that completely fold when they get notes. And I've seen the sweet spot in between, which is folks who stand for what they believe in, but also aren't afraid to take a note when it's a good note. Because I don't think that the lesson of our movie is ignore everybody, right? If you watch the movie, that's clearly not the case. We only get better by taking the good notes, right? And of course, there's a way to deliver those notes, that feedback that's going to be helpful, rather than completely turn somebody off and make them defensive. But I do think that like it, being a writer, it's a really difficult balance of when do I stand up for myself and my material and say, no, this is the story, and when do I say, you know what, shoot, like you're right and I need to incorporate that. Or maybe your note isn't exactly spot on, but there's something underneath that I need to incorporate. And I think that's the sign of a good writer, is somebody who knows that difference, if you will.
And we see that happen with Amy at the end of the film. That's the most satisfying part of it all, where she finds her voice and she defends her work, because that's what you have to do in this industry. you have to constantly defend your work and your motives. And I feel like she went through hell, but she found her voice, and I love that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you feel the same with all of our scripts, but it does feel like every script is kind of a battle in a sense because you're constantly trying to make it, you want it to be your own, right? Like at the end of the day, you have to enjoy your own movies, but at the same time, you also need to please an audience. You need to please financiers. You need to please cast and producers and all of these different people and somehow sell them on a vision. And so again, it just goes to like that. That's why there are so few in relation to how many movies there are, so few great movies, because it's really fucking hard.
So, Luca, which was your favorite mafioso version of yourself to play?
Ooh, for me, I think it was actually the last one, the Mafia 3, the Italian version. And I've wanted to play this Italian character for a while. And ultimately, I had to be careful because if the character arc between the second and the third Mafia isn't quite right, and audiences don't actually think that the third character is a more evolved, better written character, the whole plot with Patrick and Amy doesn't really work because the whole intention is that Patrick's very good, the notes are very good, she learns lessons and improves as a screenwriter. So when it came to attacking that character, it was honestly a little nerve-wracking because I put this almost pressure on myself of saying this one has to be better than the previous one for the whole film to work.
It has to, yeah.
But luckily, because the actual notes are it's actually a dream for an actor because the notes that are given by the director, you actually get to read.
Also played by Luca.
Also, I guess, played by me. You get to see what the notes are on the page. So as long as I had that to work from, it was almost like a cheat sheet. So I got to really play with staying in the character for the day, the tattoos, the Italian music. I was singing on set to kind of stay in that pocket for the day, and ultimately we got to really have fun. Like that was a kind of character that there's no, I don't want to say no big choice that's too big, but you're ultimately allowed to really make a choice, and by the end of it stand by it and say, no, that's a genuine choice for this character and he would actually do this. And you don't get that luxury sometimes with roles. So I think definitely the third one. Mind you, the second one was also really fun to play too, but ultimately the third one.
Well, I love seeing all versions of it. I think you're a good actor because at times I would forget, oh, wait, he is the director also.
I mean, that's all just kudos to Luca. He is. I mean, he mentioned it, but the first movie we worked on, directed by my friend Steph Futridis, was called The Chameleon, and the whole premise of that movie as a short film was it was about an actor who was going through an identity crisis, and Luca played all these characters that this actor had embodied at one point in time in his career. And I feel like in everything that we've worked in, that's what we see. I mean, I've directed Luca in a number of different things, and again, we've written a number of different things together. But in everything that he does, he refuses to do the same thing twice, I think. And in this movie, he just was like, "Well, I'm going to do three totally different things." Yeah, I mean, I think that's the sign of a great actor, in my opinion.
I do also want to share, because she's not here with us right now, but it also takes a good scene partner.
Yeah.
And the amount of depth that Caitlin portrayed in her role of Amy, like it helped me discover who it was. Like I remember coming into the first day of filming and not worrying, but thinking, gosh, do I really know this character, Patrick? Do I really understand his goals, his needs, his wants, his everything, his obstacles? And Caitlin was so confident in who she was, despite the character being the complete opposite. It almost forced me to kind of, step up in a way. So Caitlin, if you're watching this, thank you, because she was a rock star to work with, an absolute dream scene partner. Yeah.
Yeah, and just to speak, this is Caitlin Morris. She plays Amy Erickson in the movie, but it's interesting because they are like fire and water or oil and water in terms of their acting styles in a sense.
Yeah.
Luca really comes from the film space and Caitlin comes from the theater world, and even their process is very different. I'm not going to say that Luca is a method actor because it has such a stigma nowadays, but you have a very distinct process in terms of how you get into character. And Caitlin's process is totally different in that sense in terms of, okay, it's like, let's study the text, let's read the lines, let's understand what that writer's intention is. Not to say that's not, you absolutely do that as well, but the way that he gets into his character and stays in that character on set versus what Caitlin does, which is sort of a little bit more like, cool, when the camera's rolling, I'm in character. It was, I think, that played into the dynamic between Amy and Patrick in the movie, where these two characters, they could not be more different and are constantly sort of up against each other, which again I actually think can sometimes be what makes a movie great, is you've got these contrasting opinions. That's what's frustrating about this movie, I think, is that we've got a screenwriter who's like fighting for this idea and getting these notes from a guy who, yeah, he may be a bit of a dick, but he's really smart. He's a great storyteller. He knows what he's doing. And when you start to, as a screenwriter, listen to what he's saying, you go, that's a pretty good note, actually. And so that dynamic of these two people kind of understanding that they need each other and being totally different in terms of how they operate artistically, I think was really mirrored by you and Caitlin's acting styles in a sense. And when the camera, is rolling and you guys have to go toe to toe, there were moments where even Luca would make a choice, an improv choice, and sort of force Caitlin to adapt to that and break from the mold of the script. And that, not just made Caitlin in those moments, uncomfortable, let's say, but really made Amy uncomfortable, which is exactly the dynamic in the movie.
Right. Yeah, Caitlin really, she brings it in this role. She really does. She shows us the human experience, which not every role has. We see her lose herself, and ultimately we feel her anxiety. And I think that she did such a great job in that role.
We're biased, but we tend to agree. Yeah, I mean that's this movie only works if you're sitting there in the seat, sort of with sweaty palms or like fidgeting a little bit, and I think it's interesting because we've now taken this movie around enough to sit with multiple audiences and to see that what I think is really cool is through her performance, even though she is a screenwriter and an artist, it really it transcends that. You don't have to be a writer to relate to this movie.
Right.
I've talked to folks who do nothing in the art space and still are able to say, like, I understand that. Because really what this movie is about is it's about passion and obsession, right? And the idea that, like, if you love something and you're going after something so intensely, this is what you might experience. And I think that anybody who has a passion in life, whether it's, being an entrepreneur, being a teacher, being a firefighter, who knows, I think there's something that you can connect to and relate to in this movie, largely through Caitlin's performance.
And I think on top of that, one thing that was exciting from an arc standpoint, and again on the connecting standpoint, is ultimately the amount of people that have connected with this film because they've been pushed by somebody so far that they resent them. But then when they look back on their lives and their achievements, they go, yeah, but without them, I probably wouldn't be where I am today. That inner conflict is so normal that I didn't realize that was going to land so hard.
Yeah.
And some people, like Alex said, like some people that I've watched this that aren't in film, they know nothing about film. In construction, for example, they connected to that one part,
Right.
whether it's family, friend, or colleague. And ultimately, it's a story about that relationship in its truest form.
Well, thank you so much. I'm glad we got to sit down and talk Bravado.
Yeah.
And I urge everybody to watch it. It is amazing.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very
It's
much.
great.
Thanks.